Well, hello everyone. I'm Laszlo Vasco, and this is the first video for my channel, Micro Adventures, meant to showcase my love of travel, along with gadgets and my interest in all things micro or small and how to make travel easier, as well as my passion for all sorts of modes of transportation. So I'm hoping to showcase a lot of my hobbies, which are aviation, as well as cars, bikes, boats, etc. But to start with, I wanted to actually start by focusing on photography. Um, I got my first camera from my parents for Christmas back when I was in the sixth grade, and I've enjoyed and had a passion for photography ever since, as well as for the equipment for it. So what I thought is to not to provide an in-depth history of photography, but to sort of focus on the concept of micro, or i.e. pocketable, or cameras that were intended for travel. And I have here a selection from my collection. I've been collecting and using vintage cameras back when, before we had digital and we had film. I really enjoyed using vintage cameras, especially the unique character that their lenses would give. So initially, and actually, obviously, I don't have the very first Kodak camera, but it was actually similar to this Kodak Box Camera. This is from, I think, 1920s. They made a gazillion of these, so they're not that rare per se. And these of course then took the were the first cameras that took roll film. The first one was made of wood, and these are sheet metal ones later on, and obviously not very pocketable. So hence Kodak decided to come out with something called the Pocket 3, or in this case the Pocket 3A. It wasn't the first pocketable camera, but the reason I'm mentioning it is because I'm actually filming this on my new DJI Pocket 3 camera, and I find it ironic that it's more or less the same model name as this thing. So this is the Kodak 3A pocket camera from, they were introduced in 1903. The reason I know this too is that taking it off, so you can see where the roll film goes. These were pretty large roll films. Oops. As you can see, they're quite a bit bigger than the medium format roll films that came later on and are still in use today. So this, and in the back of here, you can also see all the patents. The patents are listed starting in 1894, going up to, actually on this one, it's October 1909. So this particular sample was released shortly thereafter, in 1909 or 1910. The reason it's called the pocket camera, as you could maybe somewhat already guess, is that you could collapse it and fold it. It's got these leather belows. Now that wasn't new to roll film cameras per se. The plate cameras beforehand, which I'm sure you've seen, these big wooden box cameras, and they had the leather belows too. So those folded up as well, but those were definitely not necessarily pocketable per se. Whereas this guy, oh, actually, before I start folding it, need to get it, slide into the little doghouse, press this down, Folds right up. And here we go. The Pocket 3A. Pretty neat engineering too. I love the way that you open it up. It's actually pretty hard to find. So you don't visually see any buttons, but you could see this little raised knob, and that's actually the button underneath. Press that, it opens right up. Open up the little lag and pull the camera right out. And it has a scale here, so actually the way you focused it is by moving it and adjusting it according to the scale. And another neat feature that I love on this is the shutter mechanism. It used a pneumatic shutter with air pressure, sort of like air shocks. And you can kind of see that the way this worked, you could see the pistons here. And when you hit the shutter, the little piston rises and falls, opens up and closes. Hold on. Here we go. Rises and closes. So from 1909, still functions today, unlike some of the other cameras with the shutters that were used later on. So pretty fascinating. Pretty fascinating piece. So all right. So now moving on from the Kodak over to Europe, we have this guy. So it's sort of an example of indeed how plate cameras were, I guess, pocketable. So it wasn't necessarily the roll film that enabled it, because this little guy, well, comparatively speaking, is a plate camera. I just don't happen to have plates that go in for it. But the plate went in the back, and then a cover to make it light tight, and this indeed also, you know, slides in and folds up the same way as the Kodak. But what is sort of neat with this one, and by the way, so this is a German camera from a company called Orionwerk, who started in the late 19th century, in 1893, in Hanover, Germany. What is, and this particular one, I'm guessing, is late 20s or mid 20s, something like that. And what's neat with this one is that it came with this film back, because that was made by another company called Rolex, not the watchmaker, but another company that patented. It says Rolex patent right there. So this took a roll film and allowed you to you could kind of open it up, but it's actually really hard, so I'm not going to open it up. It's a pain in the butt to set it up. But anyway, it allowed you to then slide this into a plate camera and use a roll film in a plate camera. And this particular example I found at a flea market in the Netherlands, in Arnhem. For those of you that are World War II buffs, you will remember that Arnhem was the site of one of the toughest battles in World War II, in the Market Garden invasion, or not invasion, but the Operation Market Garden. And it's the scene of a bridge too far, where and that bridge still exists in Arnhem, and there's a great museum there, by the way, but now we're getting distracted. So anyway, I found this there in a flea market, and it struck me the way it, in its shape. I mean, it kind of looks like it went through World War II, and I imagine that it did. I have a feeling that this camera was indeed used and in World War II. So it's a pretty neat piece. So let's see, which one should we cover next? Right, so now we'll talk about moving into sort of the films that you might be more familiar with, i.e. the 35 millimeter film. And we have two neat little cameras that I wanted to show. So another brand you'll immediately recognize is Agfa, another German brand that, of course, was one of the competitors along with Fuji. So Fuji, Kodak, and Agfa were the three major film manufacturers, but Agfa also manufactured cameras actually, and going way back. So this is the Agfa Karat Art Deco, which was actually the first Agfa Karat camera, and it is really neat. It's got this cast aluminum housing or body, and as you can see, it's also a collapsible camera. It collapses in, pops right out. So now we're starting to really think about pocketable, as you could see. So yeah, so 35 millimeter film. I mean, some people think that it was Leica that invented the 35 millimeter camera. Of course, the film itself preceded the use in cameras. And what's pretty interesting that I didn't know, but when I was researching this on the internet, is that the 35 millimeter film was not invented by Kodak. Kodak was obviously the major innovator in film itself, but it was invented by the Thomas Edison Labs in Edison, New Jersey. And it was patented in 1891. So well before the Leica cameras, or actually well before any camera was using it for photography. Initially, because it was used for cinema. So it was the roll film that was invented for movie cameras, and so it was only much later actually that it became a Kodak product. So I don't actually recall off the top of my head which camera initially used it in cameras. It was not Leica, but of course Leica was one of the early ones as well, but along with other companies. So this is the Agfa Karat, and with a really neat Art Deco style. The later ones are not as pretty. They're not Art Deco, but it's pretty neat and pocketable. And oh yeah, what is also neat with this one is, so yes, 35 millimeter film, but the cartridges that we're so familiar with didn't yet exist. So there were various mechanisms to use 35 millimeter film, and this was sort of like a precursor to the film cartridges. They're just little canisters that Agfa made, and you kind of pushed, or presumably it came with one already rolled in, kind of pulled it out. There was no spindle or anything in it, so the film just rolled up in itself. And so the way it advanced was you have the sprockets right in the camera, so when you wound it up, then the sprockets moved the film from one canister to the other. When you were done, you don't have to roll it, wind it back like in later cameras. You simply opened it up and took the full canister. The shutter is really not working as well. It does open, but it takes about 2 seconds to close, so wouldn't be able to, unfortunately, use this unless you manage to fix it. So anyway, that one. So that's the Agfa one, and of course Kodak had to come up with something similar. So Kodak came up with the Bantam series. Now look how pretty neat this one is. This too collapses. You can collapse the finder on it, and it is a pretty slim camera. So this is pretty small. I mean, remarkably small, because this is indeed a full frame camera, and from the 1930s. These came out in this came out around 1938, and so right before World War One, and sorry, right before World War Two, and a lot easier to pocket than the initial Pocket 3. So pretty neat little guy. Now this used a different film, so it didn't. In fact, you can see how thin it is. So it didn't use the canisters. It used, interestingly, it used 35mm sized film, but Kodak decided to innovate a bit and make the film usable space on the film bigger by not having it be perforated or having the little sprocket holes on both top and bottom. It was only on the top, and so this was called the 828 film instead of 35mm. It was called the 828 film that they used. So that I misspoke, because actually the imaging format on this is actually then slightly bigger than full frame, what today we would call full frame, i.e. 35mm. So those were those guys, and another 35mm camera. Now on this one you can't really see the leather billows, but actually it's in there. This too folds up, opens right back up, and this is the Zeiss Ikon Ikonta camera, 35mm. This now does use, if I remember right, it does use the regular canister films that then started to come out. Let's see, yeah, this is now after World War II, introduced in 1948, and there's a variety of these. This was one of the first one, the Ikonta. Then later on, anyway, they had various models. But now you might be wondering what this little guy on top is. So one challenge back then was, well, how on earth do you take pictures with these things? How do you know which shutter speed to set? Obviously, these weren't automatic cameras. You had to focus and set the aperture of the lens, which is the lens opening, and then set your shutter speed, and then you cocked the shutter, and then you released it. Now, how do you know what settings to use? So this guy on top is a lightmeter, and this is also from Zeiss Ikon, and this is a real early one. So this is the Zeiss Ikon Helicon photoelectric meter from 1935. I mean, prior to it, it was more or less guesswork, but when they started to come out with these photoelectric light meters, it allowed you to measure the light and set your film speed and so on and so forth, and figure out what shutter speed and aperture to use. And it's pretty neat. It clips right on top on the cameras. Yeah, these later on oftentimes were handheld, for both for cinema and for photography. They were like this. This one is in beautiful shape. This is a Weston Master II. There's the instructions for it. Weston Electrical Instrument Corporation, Newark, New Jersey. A lot of stuff coming out from New Jersey, which is where I grew up, actually. Not Newark, but North Jersey. So this is a pretty neat meter, and beautiful shape. Amazingly, it still sort of works. I don't know if you could see the needle move when I'm pointing it towards the lamp. but it should be higher, so it's not as sensitive. It lost sensitivity, so I would not trust this anymore. But pretty neat little apparatus. Yeah, so these were very common. Everybody used these back in the day. These types of things for adjusting the exposure. So moving a little bit beyond, a little bit bigger size. I mentioned medium format before. So what became popular, more or less after World War II per se, is the 120 size film. And this is what became known as medium format. And medium format was used for most of the professional work. So 35mm was used for photojournalism, and that's where cameras like Leica, Nikon, Canon, and others became extremely popular, especially documenting news around the world, including the Korean War, Vietnam War, etc. So that's where those smaller cameras worked. But otherwise, for professional photography, use medium format, use the 120 films, and so these were a bigger roll film. And the two cameras here that are medium format that I'll show you are both collapsible, but perhaps the most well-known medium format camera was Hasselblad from Sweden. And I had a Hasselblad that I really regret selling. I actually sold my Hasselblad to purchase my first digital camera because I was so excited about the quality coming out from digital cameras, and this was mid-2000s, that I sold foolishly my Hasselblad medium format camera. But anyway, so these guys, this is a 6x6 size, so it's a square format similar to what Hasselblad's used, or actually the same format. And again, collapsible. This one is called a Meopta, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but Meopta Milona from Czechoslovakia, of all places, huh? So, yep, they made stuff in Eastern Europe as well. Pretty. I love the styling on this, the square shape. And then the last for this episode to mention is a Voigtlander camera. And in the next episode, I will cover Voigtlander more exclusively because I have a bunch of Voigtlander cameras. It's my favorite brand that I collected because I always found it just very, very beautiful, exquisitely made, and just beautiful cameras. So this one is the Voigtlander Bessa I from 1951 is when they started making these. And these took 6x9 images, so 6x9 centimeter images on the 120 film. It had a pretty useless little viewfinder where you could actually adjust. It actually had, you were able to adjust your size if you wanted to use 6x9 or 4x6 with a mask inside. But anyway, wonderful camera. I did not get a chance to use this one. Maybe I should. Maybe I should just get some 120 film. So that you could still buy and shoot. And if you look it up, some people, lots of other people review these, and you can see images that it takes. It's a pretty neat, not quite pocketable, but I guess quote pocketable camera. So that's it for this initial intro into the world of compact cameras. And we'll cover some others, and this is just to get going. And before the aim of this for me is to basically show or demonstrate how these get used in practice. So it's not just talking about the gear, but I figured to start with, let's talk about the gear, and then we can take it out and enjoy shooting with compact cameras, but that's not the only thing we're going to be doing. We're going to be going on tiny folding bicycles and tiny motorboats and tiny airplanes to have some adventure. So stick around, and I'll see you next time.